Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Matthew Stevens. I'm from eHotelier and I'll be your facilitator today on what promises to be an insightful presentation from two of the industry's leading minds in marketing. Today we'll be exploring how to build traveller trust through recovery by listening and learning to feedback and converting these lessons into profitability for your hotel. Before we get started, to ensure an efficient session, the usual few housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registrants after the conclusion of the webinar. We'll be sending you an email containing a link to the address you used to register. We'll be muting all participants to prevent background noise and to ensure the presentation runs smoothly. We encourage your questions through the chat box, and based on time available, we'll cover these off at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will be presented by Nikki Graham, VP of Marketing at Sendine, and Chris Alexander, Founder and CEO at Guest Review. Nikki is VP of Marketing at Sendine, the leading innovative cloud software and services provider for the hospitality industry. With a focus on an integrated hotel CRM, hotel sales and revenue strategy technology platforms, Sendine drives sales, marketing and revenue performance for tens of thousands of hotels across the globe. Welcome, Nikki.
Thanks, Matt.
Our second panelist is Chris Alexander. Chris is the founder and CEO at Guest Review, helping hotels, groups, tour operators and activities across the world get a better understanding of their guests through the data and insights gained from their guest feedback and online reviews, using that data to improve guest satisfaction and driving direct bookings. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Matt. Very good to be here today.
To say the last 12 months has been a significant challenge for everyone in the travel industry would be an understatement. However, as we now move into recovery, Nikki and Chris will be sharing how listening to your guests and learning from their feedback will assist you to maximize business opportunities through fine-tuning operations, maximizing occupancy, and not only driving room rate, but maximizing total revenue. Today, we'll be starting with an overview of the current landscape. We'll look at the guest journey. We'll discuss the importance of listening to your guests and learning from the feedback, and then how to convert that feedback into profitability for your property. As I mentioned, at the end, we'll have time for questions and discussion. So thank you, Nikki, over to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Very pleased to be here today and talk about this really important topic as we start to slowly come out of the pandemic and head towards recovery. So, as well as booking pattern and occupancy changes that we've all seen, consumer expectation has changed considerably as well. COVID-19 has changed almost every aspect of consumer behaviour. Those who are able to travel are looking for safe experiences, the ability to social distance, have access to clean rooms, and staff on site who abide by industry standard safety recommendations. These factors are key when guests are now determining where to stay. Consumers have also shifted their behaviour even more online. We're using our devices more than ever for even more activities day to day, and this is now expected when we travel too. So with that, unfortunately, people aren't actually able to travel huge distances at the moment. It's mostly drive-in and regional travel that's driving demand at the moment. People are looking for places that have open spaces and offer maybe a more secluded or outdoor experience. The bookings also, types of bookings have changed. As we've seen earlier, guests are booking with shorter lead times and weekend bookings seem to be becoming really, really popular. There are low levels, of course, of international travel, albeit we're starting to see this pick up slowly as travel corridors are opening, especially as we've seen in the UK with the traffic light system of opening up for green countries. There's been a lot of bookings for travel there, which is great to see. So, as well as all of that, we've also seen massive shift in how hotels are being run. The convergence of sales, distribution, marketing, and revenue management was already starting to happen prior to COVID, but with the dramatic drop in business, positions have been eliminated and more emphasis has been put on doing more with less. So with team sizes dramatically smaller, budgets being cut, teams are working with less, but hoteliers are also faced with implementing new protocols, technologies, and safety standards, all while trying to do their day jobs. So it has been a big almighty shift from every perspective. So how do we navigate that path to drive success and come out the other side with more prosperous opportunities in the future? Our habits as consumers won't revert back to what they were before. They'll continue to evolve. So ensuring that technology, safety, guest satisfaction, and expectation are at the heart of what we do as an industry is key.
Thanks, Kiki. I think that is a great, accurate summary of where we are in the world, and given what it is today, I think the relevant part from our side and what we're seeing is that while guests have always been important in the hospitality industry, today they are more so than ever, given the current circumstances, and as a result, their feedback is as well. The technology enables us to do far more today with this data than we've ever been able to do, and to provide insights that really make a significant difference to operations.
Great. So here on this slide, we have the guest journey, which really shows us all the digital touch points that tie into the guest journey from a digital standpoint. Now, hoteliers really do need to be thinking about this whole picture now. It's not just about one aspect here and another there. Without this full picture, it's very challenging to get a handle on the data that is now necessary to enhance the whole guest experience in a post-pandemic world. If we start from search and discover, right in the top right of the slide, we can see that there are multiple ways a guest can interact with a hotel even before they book, from search to meta to SEO, through to going to your own website, looking at your social media, and then other marketing offers. But once that booking's taken place, there's now even more opportunity to gather information from your guests and build out that important guest profile. At this point, you're now able to start listening to your guests before they even arrive. You can open up the dialogue, and this in turn will enable you to enhance the experience for them and ultimately influence them to book again and drive loyalty with your brand.
I think this guest journey that we see here has become absolutely critical for every property around the world, given our pandemic, to understand properly. It plots the whole route through the whole process, which looks fairly complicated, but actually it's pretty much common sense when you go through it and you understand it. What we have done with Sendine, what Guest Review and Sendine have done, is pull together an integration that captures the data from multiple areas and pulls it back in, as Nikki said, to the single source of truth, which is the guest profile. This integration has been designed to update this entire journey at all the relevant points with topical real-time data, understanding what's happening with the guests and the feedback from them, and aimed at enhancing operations and marketing information throughout the guest journey. Without this integration, or with this integration, we can automate the guest feedback at multiple points, as I've said, either at a pre-stay or an in-stay when they're in the property, or as a post-stay process afterwards, to confirm and to update the expectations and the guest feedback and their expectations.
That's great, and this all feeds back into kind of the nurture and re-engage aspect of the guest journey here. So we can see that by looking at your analytics and reviewing the data that you have, you can actually learn from that information and inform your business decisions to make sure that the demand that you're driving for the next set of guests, or even the opportunity for those guests to return, is being looked at in detail, and you can improve on anything or change something based on what's been successful and what hasn't.
Absolutely. Listening to your guests is more critical today than it's ever been. I think what's clear is that today, given the state of travel and the pandemic circumstances around, we have a buyer's market. Demand for travel is low and supply is high, and every property around the world is going to need to offer exceptional experience at all points in the guest journey to attract those guests. Having that deeper understanding will make a massive difference, and gathering that guest data through the whole journey to consolidating it and using it in wise and clever methods is going to enable you to build a robust, data-rich guest profile that will truly help you to understand your guests and what they're expecting. I wanted to just run through some of the trust and confidence issues, because I think those are absolutely critical today. Engaging with past guests to see what they would like in the property, or to see what they would like you to do to keep them safe, is critical. So that can be done by sending out surveys to your existing database, which also gives you an opportunity to encourage repeat visits and recommunicate and reiterate what you're doing to do that. Asking guests about specific COVID questions, either with custom surveys or in amongst your other communication tools, and using those results to prove that you are COVID safe. What's clear in the world today, and has been growing, but is probably even more so the case today, is that travelers trust reviews from other guests far more than the information that's provided by the brand. So the online reviews and the social proof are really important sources of information about safety for your guests. Hoteliers need to rebuild traveler confidence today, and using online reputation is an excellent way to do that. Reviews from pre-COVID data or pre-COVID times are not really that relevant anymore. As Nikki said, the world has changed significantly. So what's important is to have up-to-date information and feedback so that your guests feel safe, and you can encourage repeat visits with the recent reviews to drive more business. The automation and the speed of response today is more critical than ever. So once you have that, and we'll move into the next section, which is about learning from your guests. We wanted to show you I wanted to show you just some insights that we got from a recent case study that we did with one of our clients. We did a survey of about 2,500 potential travelers around the world with one particular client. And we learned some very interesting insights from this, which hadn't been considered in the past. For example, some of the ones that you would expect about people needing sanitizers and hands being sprayed, virtual room keys, virtual contactless check-in and virtual contactless checkout were important. But what was also really important was that there was a huge dislike of single-use plastic cutlery and the rooms not being serviced. So these kinds of insights really help to understand things a little bit better. We learn about plenty of new safety procedures that they would be happy with, but also with a bunch of procedures that they would be unhappy or unsure about. So these are just some examples very quickly of the incredibly useful insights that you can derive from your guests and listen to the feedback to help you make the decisions that are really going to work for you and not those that will work against you.
Great, and just to kind of echo on top of that, I think that's a great example, what you shared there, Chris. Outside of that as well, we've actually seen that there's some Forrester data out there that's shown that if consumers feel a brand is putting them first, they're more likely to trust that brand to keep them safe. They're more likely to recommend them to family or friends, or even travel there again in the future. So actually, by portraying new initiatives that you've taken at your brand or hotel to keep guests safe, consumers will recognize that and trust you to keep themselves. So the more trust you can build, the more success you will have in the long run, especially coming out of this pandemic. And this quote here is a great example. 97% of guests feel safe with us. That's a huge, incredibly powerful statistic, and one that you really should shout about from the rooftops. And I think, Chris, you've got a little bit more to share on that comment.
Yeah, that quote actually came back from that study that we did with those 2,500 travelers. And what this property has done is, in asking those questions and in understanding that, they can go back to their own staff to say, look, we think we've got this right, this is what we're saying. But they can also take that statistic and use it in their marketing materials and push it out there, which essentially just reassures all of the other travelers out there that it's safe to go. Safety is such a big consideration in the world for travel today. And this statistic is an excellent one that is based on real-time data that's coming directly out of their guest database, and it's a great way to use some of the insights.
So I think just to recap on this slide, I think the 4 key points here: go in with your plan, be flexible, ask for feedback before, during, and after the guest stays, and then use that feedback to really improve processes. There's some great examples that Chris has shared there. Once you have that feedback, share it. If it's positive, if there's something that you believe that you can leverage from that, share it as wide as possible to make sure you really get that recognition and showcase all the hard work that you're doing behind the scenes. So the final section, earn from your guests. Obviously, this is kind of where the money's at, right? So you've done a lot of the hard work. You've listened to your guests. You've gathered feedback. You're starting to learn from that feedback and listen and perhaps even share some of those findings that you've gathered. The next step really is how you can then utilize that and automate and perhaps start personalizing to drive some demand. So here's where your CRM profile really comes in. It's been working hard in the background, collating all of that really great data that you've been gathering. It's been listening to your guests, and you've been building this central source of truth for each guest. And with this data, you're now able to segment and target specific people based on the information shared with you. There's some really great, powerful stats here. First one, using personalization can reduce acquisition costs by up to 50% and increase marketing spend efficiency by 10 to 30%. This data is an external source from the Relevancy Group. Really powerful stat that shows that by using this segmented data, you can really start to leverage and drive demand. We've also seen from Sendine internal data that actual loyal guests book at 47% higher ADR. They tend to stay up to 80% more often and spend up to 164% more than non-members. So you can see these sorts of results actually come from tactics like email marketing, on-property gifts or offers, tailored face-to-face communication. All of it goes a long way. And simple things, such as welcome back, Mrs. Smith. If she's arriving on property, you can see from her guest profile that she stayed before. Maybe she gave some feedback in a previous guest survey, and she shared that the pillows weren't that comfortable. You could actually mention on arrival, as well as welcoming her back, that her pillows have been upgraded based on the feedback she shared last time. These are really, really simple measures that actually go a huge way and can be leveraged just by simply having data consolidated into one master guest profile. So this level of engagement with your guests can actually really start to drive loyalty. And as we've seen from the data here, this is where the money can really be seen, and you can start to see positive experiences really turn into demand in the future, and ultimately will turn into positive reviews for your property and hopefully sharing with friends and family your experience. So once you've been able to identify and sort of start leveraging that data, you can use it in different channels and you can start driving demand where you really need it most. You can target guest spend on areas of the business that perhaps have not had the usual influx of demand as usual. Of course, looking for occupancy in rooms is vital, and that should still always be the driving factor. But maybe, for example, your restaurant's been closed for a long time. You're finally now able to open up to the world, but you want to make sure that you are driving demand for it, and it doesn't, the opening doesn't fall flat on its face. This is where you can start leveraging all those data points that we've covered. So start by segmenting your database, personalize those communications and sharing. For example, first you could start targeting your local previous customers. You could send them an offer to come into the restaurant. Now you've opened and enjoy 10 or 20% off. You're tapping into your local database here, quite likely to be loyal previous guests. And then you're driving a demand for an area of the business that has suffered tremendously over the past year. So by leveraging your repeat customers, you know that a large proportion will return, and they're most likely to spend quite a bit. This is just one example that you can use to kind of fill in the gap for non-room revenue. Outside of driving restaurant demand, you can also look at other alternatives, you know, wellness-focused activities. You could look at discounts for locals that fall outside of the restaurant. You know, perhaps they want to enjoy nature, explore the area, or even just have a break from being in the house. If you do send these types of campaigns, always make sure you use emotive language that will really help you drive interest. And you can also get creative with things like childcare and pet services. Again, you can leverage the data from your CRM. If you know that they've traveled with family in the past, you can make sure you're sending them family offers. And again, same for if they've traveled with their pets in the past, the same thing. The options are really endless. And as mentioned, the more data you have, the better you can get at personalization and the more opportunity you have to drive loyalty and ultimately demand.
I think it's never been truer in the world that, you know, data is absolutely key, and it's what has excited us so much at Guest Review, working with Sendine in the integration and being able to collaborate together and pull this data into one single source of truth. I think that's absolutely going to be the benefit for the properties that do really well, and it's going to be the thing that enables them to get up and running as quickly as possible. I think it's been said time and time again, the properties need to be more aware of who the guest is, what they're expecting. With so much at stake and so much competition and supply out there, it's critical to be able to do that. So using the power of the granular data and the guest profiles to accomplish that and drive more demand, I think is critically important. Perhaps even re-engaging with guests, as you said, Nikki, who fit the COVID traveler profile, making sure that they're happy locals, people who have stayed with you before and who have had a good time. The general, I think, just as a final message from me, I think the general worldwide consensus is that no one really knows how long the road to recovery is going to be. And obviously for some that will happen sooner rather than later, depending on some of the major circumstances going on. We individually, we can't control the macro world timelines on this, but what we do have is the tools and technology at our disposal so that we can control how well we do in our own space and the service offerings that we're doing, and influencing things in as a positive a manner as possible that ultimately enables us to recover and to benefit as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you very much. That's the end of our presentation. I think it's a fantastic, very insightful presentation. Thank you very much, Nikki and Chris. As you've both said, you know, it's a very uncertain time. We don't know where guest expectations are, and it's really important to keep a finger on the heartbeat right now. We've got a couple of questions. Nikki, how do you make sure you don't over communicate at this time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's obviously the temptation is there to do that. You opening back up again, you want to kind of get as many people through the door as you possibly can. But ultimately, if you are actually personalizing and segmenting your database properly, you'll find that you really won't be messaging those people and inundating them. If you're really targeting the communications to send to different segments, for example, dining offers, or if you're sending an offer to a family groups, you probably won't see overlap. But a really good marketing technique is just to set up suppression lists for the marketers on the call. Make sure that if you are sending sort of a weekly maybe newsletter or cadence, that if you are also sending one-off offers, that those lists that you're sending those offers to are suppressed from the kind of weekly newsletter. Those sort of simple things can just make sure that you're not inundating and annoying the consumer as well, because everyone's getting a lot of emails. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thanks, Nikki. Chris, we've got another question here. With many hotels still running on reduced staff, how do we manage so many tech platforms?
favorite topic often, and particularly today, as there are so many tools available to be able to do this. We talk about a tech stack in the hospitality industry, and sometimes it's quite scary. I remember seeing some of the earlier graphs of products and stuff that were available out there, and it was truly daunting. I think, Max, the real key here is integration, having different partners working together and pulling data in from different places, but then behind the scenes having automated sharing mechanisms, such as the integration we have with Sendine, where we pass data backwards and forwards in an uninhibited way that benefits not only ourselves and Sendine, but the hospitality client as well, so that it simplifies things. So I think there are multiple answers to that. Choose carefully who you use, but I think the key answer to that is choose partners who can integrate with each other, so that you don't have to be the one doing manual steps to move data from one place to another, but it can run remotely, as we believe it should do, in the background, and automatically update and provide real-time information.
Yeah, choose your partners carefully and choose those that integrate. So both of you, I guess, for the next question, COVID restrictions mean we try to work remotely as much as possible. Can we use these tools from anywhere? Maybe start with Nikki.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, both of our solutions, I mean, all of Sendine's solutions are cloud-based, so can be used from anywhere. And yeah, definitely feeling the remote vibes. We're all experiencing it. I know that people are starting to slowly go back, which is great. But I think, again, another kind of fallout from this pandemic is that people have got used to the fact that they can work from home when perhaps they want to or they need to, and it isn't a detriment to the business. So there is obviously that always that flexibility there with all our solutions.
Thanks.
Yeah, and similarly, I think Guest Review also works on a cloud-based basis, where whichever device or whichever location you're at, you can always get your data. It's always accessible, and we actually provide additional tools and notifications, so that, you know, in the event of certain things happening, triggers are executed that will warn you and notify you about circumstances that need your attention. So absolutely, you can use Guest Review from any device and any platform, wherever you happen to be, whatever time of day and night it is.
We've got another question here, perhaps for Chris. You've spoken about guest surveys and online reviews. If my guests are leaving online reviews, why do I need to survey them?
I think that it's also a really great question. There are two aspects that we deal with, as we've just spoken about: online reviews from all the major review platforms such as TripAdvisor and Booking and Google and Facebook and Expedia, etc., etc. And there are lots of those. We pull all of those together. I think the real one of the big aspects about doing direct surveys is, number one, we can control that. We customize those. You can ask whatever questions are important to you. So if you took you know, a beach resort in Bali, for example, where they have a particular USP versus, you know, a game lodge in Kenya, for example, they're very different USPs. And most of the online platforms, well, they will give you a score and pretty much a comment box. The surveys enable you to ask far more detailed questions and understand more about your property, and direct your guests to answer the questions that you really need the answers for. So whilst both are important, they do have different functions. And what we do at Guest Review is we pull those all together and we normalize those between the whole thing, so that you can look at the situation as a whole. So as we've said, the online reviews are really important. It's what people are seeing, and properties need to see what's being said about them and monitor that in real time, not a week later once it's up there. It needs to get to that immediately. But the surveys give you far richer information. And that information you can take back and feed back into the guest profile inside your CRM as well. And that there's real gold and real valuable data inside there that helps you to tweak your marketing campaigns.
Understanding your guests. Thank you very much, Nikki and Chris. Unfortunately, we're out of time. If there are any other questions, please feel free to email them to us at eHotelia. We'll pass them on to Nikki and Chris and get back to you as well. Or you can contact Nikki and Chris, Nikki at sendine.com, Chris at guestreview.com. Thank you once again for attending. We wish you very good health, good occupancy, and prosperity through recovery. All the best.
Thank you, Matt.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all.